supply chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Good morning, everyone. I am live from New York for Thoughts and Coffee today, and I can't wait because we've got a really fun show coming up. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended podcast, as well as the Blended Pledge. And we wouldn't be able to have this show without our show sponsor. So say you're at work and all the lights flicker and then go out. You try to move and bump into something. You turn and bump into something else. You can't work like this. You need to be able to see what's happening. Well, this is how your inventory feels. Fastenal has unique inventory solutions that sends data to the cloud and helps you avoid stockouts while not carrying excess inventory. Don't stay in the dark. Let Fastenal shine a light on the parts and supplies that keep your business running. Go to fastenal.com/LTSC and see how they do it. All right. So we've got Bill and Ari from JOC joining us for the show today. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about what's happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain. So we've got a brand new episode with BlackBerry Radar, and they are going to be at IANA Expo next week. And in this particular episode, we talk about how to harness the power of asset tracking engineered for intelligence. Everything that you need to know when you're looking at asset tracking. And we talk about what they're going to be talking about and showcasing at IANA Expo next week. So go and check it out wherever you listen to the podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We also have it over on our YouTube channel as well. So go and check that out. What else have we got going on? We've got some live shows. So DC is going to be live on Friday morning at 10 a.m. and she's going to be talking about the talent shortage. We've been talking about this one for a while. So I can't wait to hear what they're going to be talking about, because the title says turning shortages into short stories. I wonder what that means. So click the attend button, even if you can't attend live, and we'll be sending you that recording. Plus, on September 21st, we are going live with Go Freight for mastering digital transformation in freight forwarding. Now, if you are a freight forwarder, a 3PL, and you want a competitive advantage, we're going to be talking all about that on September 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern. So again, click the attend button and we will send you the recording, even if you can't attend live. But this is going to be a good one. You're not going to want to miss that. And then, of course, last week, I don't know if you saw it, but we went live with IANA and TTX. And they gave such a great overview as to what the industry looks like right now, the economy, what you can expect for the rest of 2023 and looking into 2024. And so I would highly recommend going to check that out over on our YouTube channel as well. So as most of you probably already know, I am traveling quite a bit. This blur is so not the greatest. Okay, I'm going to move back a little bit. I am traveling quite a bit this fall, and so I want to encourage you to go and follow me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is BeVictorious, VICTORYUS. The reason why I want you to do that is because I am showcasing all of my travels over on my stories. It's where I do it best. And so I encourage you to go follow me and see what we're up to this fall season. All right. Well, without further ado, it's time to bring up Bill and Ari. Let's do that right now. And I will do that. Here we go. Hello, Ari and Bill. How you doing today?
Doing well.
Doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so
excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you to be here. So why don't you each take a moment to tell us who you are and what you do. Bill, let's start with you.
I'm senior editor at the Journal of Commerce for trucking, write about logistics, technology, everything I can get assigned to do. And I've been doing it for a long time now. So very good to be here today.
Awesome. And I'm going to be seeing you in person in just a couple weeks from now. We're going to be talking about that today. All right, Ari, over to you.
So I'm Ari Ashe. I'm the senior editor. I cover the Southeast ports. I cover intermodal rail. So I actually will be at IANA next week as well. And I help Bill with the coverage of the trucking industry.
Great. So Ari, I get to see you twice in September.
Yes, you do. On different sides of the country too.
That's right. We're going to go to the West Coast to come back to kind of the East Coast. No, the Midwest. Midwest. There we go. Because we're going to be in Chicago. All right. Let's put up the poll. Let's talk about this poll. So we ask everybody a question of the week every single Wednesday morning. So Nicole, if you want to put that poll up for me so I can see that, we're going to share the screen and it's coming. All right, here we go. So how important is sustainability in your supply chain strategy? I think that's 30% of you said important, 57% of you said extremely important, and 10% of you said neutral. Ari, does this surprise you when you're doing your research, you're writing the articles? How important is sustainability?
It's not surprising to me. Really, the second question one would ask off of that is, what types of resources do you put to sustainability? A lot of these cycles, when you look at labor, resources, hard assets, soft assets, you have a lot of investment when business is good, and then when business is not good, you cut back, and you become less flexible, less sustainable, less nimble, less this, less that. So really, it is important, but then the question becomes, how much money can you actually put behind the effort?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. When I was looking at this one as well, I was kind of like, 57% said extremely important, but how are we measuring it? And what aspect of sustainability are we talking about? Right? We kind of posed it as a generalized question, but it really begs the question to dive a little bit deeper into what extremely important actually means and how do people define that. Bill, what did you think of this?
I'm a little bit surprised, but I would have been more surprised a year or two ago. And I think that's because customers of the people we're polling are telling them this is extremely important. So that's why there's been this shift from, from neutral to important to extremely important. I think more and more companies have customers that are telling them, you really need to get behind this and help us meet our ESG or sustainability goals. I attended a trucking company ESG summit recently with their customers, and these were all shippers, logistics managers, mainly from manufacturers, and they were all very deeply interested in ways to get the trucking company to help them meet their own internal goals. So I think the real question is, as you and Ari both said, what does extremely important mean? Where do they need to have the focus? And what kind of resources can they devote to it? I think there's still a gap between the desire to make progress, the resources available to make that needed progress. I mean, mainly money, but also what kind of standards do we have? And this is going to be something we'll be talking about at all these different events we'll be at this fall.
Yeah, we absolutely will. It's definitely a main topic and something top of people's minds. So thank you so much for that, Nicole. We can take the poll down. Let's talk a little bit about a market update. You both are talking to people in the industry all the time. So why don't you give us a bit of a market update? What are people concerned about? What are they talking about? What's keeping them up at night? Ari, I'll get you to start first.
Well, hopefully they're not staying up at night, because then they're not getting good sleep and they're not productive the next day. But what I would say is that most of the people I speak to at this point, whether we're talking about intermodal rail or the trucking industry, don't predict much of a peak season whatsoever. In the intermodal space, that would be the second consecutive peak season that essentially wasn't a peak season. And then the implications become, a lot of these shippers out there are doing their RFPs for their annual contracts in Q4 and then lock them in Q1. And so what does that mean for the rate environment between carriers and shippers in 2024? And, my gut says, whether it's truckload or intermodal, but especially intermodal, if I'm a shipper who's locking in a rate in January or February to go live in February or March, the rate may just hold flat from 2023, which was significantly down from 2022. And until there's sort of any strength in terms of the freight market, I think it's just going to kind of bounce kind of where it is right now for like the next 6 months.
So that's really interesting because we polled our audience a couple of weeks ago about peak season. And I think our options were extremely busy, busy, not so busy. And I believe, if I'm correct, most people said they were extremely busy with peak season. But you're saying it's kind of slow. So what do we say to those kind of results?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it in the freight numbers. So one way I look at it in the intermodal space, just looking at the 53-foot market, take away the sort of international component for a second.
Okay,
And
fair.
so every year since 2017, we've had either September or October or both, where more than 700,000 53-foot containers in a calendar month have been moved. Again, either in September or October or both months, each year since 2017. Based on my forecasts, that streak's going to end this year. They're not going to hit 700,000 in either one of those months. Now, hopefully I'm wrong, but from all my conversations with shippers, none of them have suggested to me that they have a significant uptick in their freight coming in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Bill, over to you. Give us a bit of a market update as to what you're hearing about. What questions do people have? How are we looking for 2024?
I think it really depends. It depends a lot on what type of mode you're using for transportation, what type of shipper you are. There's a huge split in the trucking market now that's evolved in the past couple of months between truckload and LTL. Up until, say July, less than truckload rates were declining. They were below where they were last year, but they were up from pre-pandemic and from 2020. But they were kind of following in the same general direction as the truckload rates. That has changed entirely. And the LTL market now has actually exited the freight recession ahead of its truckload counterpart, largely because of the loss of Yellow. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the loss of Yellow really has upended the less than truckload market quite a bit. A lot of carriers tried to take on a lot of Yellow's freight, maybe a little bit too much in some cases. I had one shipper telling me that their carrier made too many trips to the Yellow buffet and, had service issues as a result, had, issues with on-time deliveries as a result. Hopefully that is all working its way out, but we're told it's going to take not weeks, but, a few months for the market to rebalance itself. And when it does rebalance itself, it'll be at a higher cost to shippers than they were experiencing before Yellow's collapse. So the LTL market's very different from that truckload market, intermodal market, which is kind of bouncing along the bottom, as Ari mentioned.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I mean, I guess, like you were saying, different markets are going to experience different peak season. And I think when we asked that question again, it was a little bit more generalized. Some people probably answered it with intermodal or international freight in mind. Some people would have answered with intermodal or maybe trucking in mind as well. Now, I want to give a shout out over to Anaf and Heather on my personal LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right, so now it's time to get to our articles. And Heather says that we got her at Barbie. Well, I mean, who is not talking about Barbie right now? But one of the reasons why I chose this article is because this article is talking about nearshoring, and they're talking about the Mattel supply chain. They're talking about their consumers as fans instead of consumers. They're actually changing the word and how they think about their consumers, their customers. And they're talking about consolidating some of their North American manufacturing into Mexico, becoming one of the largest manufacturing facilities. So I'm going to send it over to you, Bill. What did you think about this particular article? What sort of stood out for you? Because I've got a lot of other key points, but I want to hear from you first.
There were some great points in this article. I thought one of the first ones that it's not about decoupling from China. It's about flexibility and managing risk.
Yeah.
And this is so important. The need to be both local or regional and global, not just, shifting from one to the other. The popular press, and I'll say in particular, you often get the impression that things are either black or white. We're either moving everything to China or we're taking everything out of China. Neither is true. So I thought that the points made about, the real reason for nearshoring is greater flexibility. That was fantastic. I really like the detail they gave here about how they build the Barbie dream house in Mexico as opposed to the Barbie dolls, which are made in Asia. So the dream house, its main shelf life is around Christmas time. So they build it in Mexico with components that are sourced elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And then it's shipped within 48 hours to Amazon or Walmart, whatever major retailer is buying this or delivering it. And the dolls, because they can be produced and shipped in high volumes at any time, I mean, they're produced further away. It's a slower part of their supply chain. So it's a really fascinating mix, how you have this really fast, almost real-time type portion of the supply chain in Mexico, and then the slower, more traditional manufactured supply chain coming from Asia. And I think the article does really show you how, for many people, it's going to be a mix of these two types of supply chains. And maybe it's more than two types, but it's not just one thing. It's going to be a mixture of assembly, longer shipping lanes and shorter shipping lanes, depending on the needs of delivery for time.
Well, I keep hearing the term glocal or glocalization. I think that's us trying to bring global and local together in this sort of flexible environment that you're talking about. And it's interesting because, like you said, local is more responsive to changes in demand. So as consumers or their fans' demands change, Mexico gives them that option because, like you said, the larger retailers, they can get to them within 48 hours. Some of the challenges and the risks that they mentioned in this particular article are around increased strain on electricity. Now, I thought that was a really interesting point because they're saying that, companies like Tesla and other companies like Lego are also going into the region. But I think we've seen some strain on electricity in Asia, in different parts of Asia as well over the last couple of months, or at least in 2023. So it was interesting that they focused on that because I think that has been a bit of a subject for 2023, regardless of where you're manufacturing. All right, Ari, over to you. What did you think?
There are a couple of thoughts I had. So first off, it kind of reminded me of something that at our conference in Chicago on September 25th, Robert Morris of Kellogg's is going to talk about. It's not about Mexico and China, but the same idea where the media, and I throw myself into it, I'm just as guilty as anyone, portrays shippers as having to be strategic or transactional. Mm-hmm. Using national truckload carriers versus regional truckload carriers, using non-asset brokers or using asset-based carriers. And so one of the things Robert's going to talk about in that class is it's not, as Bill said, a black and white thing or an either or thing, that a good supply chain has a little bit of everything. A little strategic, a little transactional. So to this article's point, which I think was a very good one, is that it's not an either or thing. You don't have to just be in Asia or near shore to Mexico. You can do a little bit of both. And wherever it makes sense, for a specific item that they're producing, you put it in the right location, but you don't necessarily put all your eggs in one basket. You're very deliberate about building out an elaborate supply chain that has a lot of redundancies in it. The second thing that article made me thought of is the opportunity for intermodal rail. Trucking has been and will still be the dominant way of moving things from Mexico into the United States. But there has been a brewing battle since Canadian Pacific acquired Kansas City Southern in terms of developing intermodal options between Mexico and the United States. So if I'm moving a load from, pick whatever state and city in Mexico to Chicago, we now not only have an option that goes to the border and then on a Union Pacific train, there's now a Canadian Pacific CPKC option. Mm-hmm. There's a Falcon Premium option, which is Ferromex and Union Pacific and Canadian National. You've got the JB Hunt option. We're going to be talking about all three actually at our conference on September 27th. But there's this brewing competition in Mexico, knowing that nearshoring is coming, mm-hmm. on how do we move those loads from Mexico to the United States? Does it all have to be on trucking, or can we provide provide attractive rail options that capture some freight, like a company like Mattel.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Ari, the topic of infrastructure is really interesting because, yes, we talked a little bit about electricity and some of the other infrastructure in the manufacturing region in northern Mexico, but there are only, I think, 80 some odd border crossing points for trucks. Mm-hmm. And the amount of freight being moved across the border by truck continues to grow year over year. And it's fueling growth in the Southwest in trucking that's not really matched elsewhere in the country. So we'll have a panel discussing this at Inland as well. But, at some point, if this continues to grow as it looks to do, we have to think about how do we move more truckloads across the Mexico-U.S. border too.
Absolutely.
The only other thing I'd quickly add is on the electricity front. We brought up Tesla's error before, and Bill brought up Mexico. We were talking about sustainability in that poll. To the extent that shippers want electric trucks, battery electric vehicle trucks, one of the major constraints, and I know Bill has heard it from trucking companies, is electricity in the United States. Mm-hmm. A power grid to be able to charge these Class 8 vehicles that are battery electric powered. So this idea that electricity is an issue is not just an issue in Mexico and China, it's an issue in the United States as well.
Yeah, even straight trucks, Ari. I mean, not Class A trucks necessarily, but battery powered, 28
box trucks.
Boxcars. Those most utilities will say, we're not going to be able to have you charge 100 of those overnight.
Yeah,
on our grid, it's a real issue.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about autonomous vehicles in just a second. So our next article right here, you actually wrote, Bill, so give us the high-level overview of what they can expect by jumping into this article and reading about what's happening with the aftermath of Yellow.
Well, as the headline says here, there is a bidding war going on for Yellow's less-than-truckload terminals and assets. And this is one of the strangest twists in the story of Yellow that I think I've ever reported on. And the story, I mean, it's a tragedy. A lot of jobs lost, a major company lost, a 99-year-old trucking company shutting down. But the fact that it seems they're worth more now, in a way, dead than alive. Estes was the first company to put up a 1.3 billion stalking horse bid for all of Yellow's terminals, like 170 terminals. Old Dominion outbid them 1.5. We could still see more bids emerge. I mean, the deadline for putting in a bid is October 15, and the bankruptcy auction, I believe, is October 18. Wow. So, there could very well emerge a rival bidder, maybe another LTL carrier, maybe a coalition of LTL carriers or a truckload carrier. But whoever controls the terminals, it's not so much, I think, that they want to get these terminals necessarily and add them to their network. They want to prevent others from getting those terminals and creating a new competitor, perhaps, because someone could come in and say, I'm going to buy all the Northeastern terminals and create a new Northeastern carrier and attach that to, say, another network. And suddenly you have a new competitor in the market. LTL carriers don't want that, obviously. They'd like to keep their pricing discipline and their market share the way it is. So I think that this is a really fascinating chess game that's going on with all of the components of the now defunct Yellow. So we'll see how this pans out in the next month or two.
Yeah.
And, these terminals could go for more than $2 billion at the end of the day. Who knows?
Yeah, lots of activity happening. So really quickly, Ari, talking about this particular article and what Bill just gave us an overview on, what can we expect to hear more? Can we expect to hear more about this at Inland? What are some of the topics? I'm guessing this is going to be a bit of a hot topic at the Inland Conference in Chicago.
Yeah, so I think, starting off of his point, clearly the only thing that's valuable left in the Yellow franchise is the real estate. The trailers are not worth much. The tractors are not worth much. It's the real estate. Mm-hmm. I think where we take it certainly at Inland is not only the impact on the LTL space, what's the impact on the truckload space, to what extent are shippers looking at what Bill said, the hot LTL Markit leading the way and saying, hey, is there a way I can send 6 or 7 or 8 pallets on a full truckload because the rates are depressed in the spot truckload market? And so to the extent shippers say, no, wait, I'll stick that on trucking just because I can get a cheap enough rate, to what extent does that start to impact pricing in the spot truckload market and start the rebound in the truckload market? And then the implication on intermodal as well, because Yellow did have 500-600 containers that they were using on BNSF railway. So what is the impact on intermodal that those containers are now no longer on rail?
Absolutely. Well, over on my personal, I want to say hi to Piyusha, Ankit. We've got Clarence, Hussein, and Victor. Hi and good morning. Thank you for joining us. All right, now we're getting to our last article. We only have a few minutes on this one, but this is about autonomous trucks. Now, this article really gives us a good overview as to what we're looking at as far as, driver, no driver, regulations, what's being taken a look at. Now, just so everybody knows, level 4 means that you have a safety driver in the cab. Level 5 says no driver. And one of the polls that they did said 68% of people are afraid of autonomous trucks in 2023. And I believe that's up from 50% in 2022. I have a couple other things to mention here, but Ari, what did you think about this article?
I think a lot of these technologies are going a lot slower in the United States than they probably would elsewhere. You see it in all walks of sort of technology, the automation in terminals, which in marine terminals, which is common throughout the world, has lagged in the United States because of the union push to keep those jobs. This is clearly another example where probably in other parts of the world it will happen first because of the uneasiness and regulation in the United States. Same thing with the battery electric vehicles. Same thing. The U.S. seems to lag behind because of the regulation and the sort of pushback on regulation. And so I would just sit here and say I'm very skeptical that the United States will be a leader on this front, rather be a follower, and other countries will get there far before us, unfortunately.
Interesting. Now, before I go to Bill, one of the things that I kind of wonder, because they're talking about in this article about some of the trucks being done remote control. And so my question is, what happens when that connection fails and you're a level 5 with no driver, right? And so that 68% of people who are afraid, that's a question that I have, making me probably part of that 68%, because what happens when that does happen? I think that's part of the discussions in the regulations. So Bill, I've only left you with about a minute. So tell us what you think about this article.
A lot of great points again. I think that what this says to me is that we have to rethink what we're trying to do with autonomous trucks. I think there is a big difference between autonomous and automation. We're going to discuss that at Inland. We have a whole panel on this. But the idea that we're going to have driverless trucks, which is how this has been billed at large for years, I think we need to rethink that and look at what the benefits are for safety from a lower level of automation with this technology. When you get to having completely autonomous trucks, there needs to be a whole different infrastructure out there to make them run and compatible with, passenger cars, motorists on the highways. We're not going to be there for a long time, I think.
Well, in this article, they're saying that driverless trucks will be on the road by 2024 in North America.
Maybe one or two.
Maybe one or two, but they're also talking about rules and regulations around safety and maintenance. Like you said, if it needs to happen while it's on the road, how does that happen? Where do we meet them to be able to do those inspections? How often do those inspections need to have? So I think there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And so I appreciate you both for sharing your thoughts on this. All right, let's let everybody know where we're going to be the end of this week. Actually, tomorrow I fly to Chicago and I'm going to be at the Visibility Conference with Kites. We've got IANA Expo happening next week as well. And of course, we've got Inland happening September 25th and 27th in Chicago. If you don't have your tickets, go and get them. I am going to be doing interviews on Inland TV, and I think you're going to be able to see those potentially on social media, but those are only going to give you nuggets of information. You're going to want to be there to get all of the information. So Bill and Ari, thank you so much for joining me today. Next week, you're going to have Akshay from Terminal 49 and Audrey Ross. They're going to be here while I'm at Intermodal Expo. And so again, Ari, Bill, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks everybody in the audience for being here too. Have a great week.